welcome to my channel. If you're new here, hi, hello, welcome. I am Sherrilyn and I am so glad you found me over here on my channel. I share true crime cases, sometimes sprinkled in with a little bit of cults, predatory people and groups. If this is something that aligns with you, I would love to have you stick around, like and subscribe. Make sure to turn on your notifications because I have changed my upload schedule to about 2 videos a week most weeks. I am supposed to be traveling this week. That's kind of up in the air, so perhaps it'll only be 1, but I'm hoping that we can get 2 out this week. Anyways, the point of the notification is that if you're notified, I usually get to interact and talk with you in the comments during the first hour of the video. So I would love to be able to do that and send you some love. Okay, let's get started. Before we do that, I have a very quick message for you. I want to give a huge thank you to our sponsor today, Fume. If you have never heard of Fume before, Fume is an innovative, award-nominated device that helps with what can be a really stressful transition of breaking bad habits into much more enjoyable and attainable process. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air, and instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural, delicious flavors. If you've seen my videos before, you know how much I love my Fume, how much it has helped me. I'm actually getting ready to go and do some work in New York in the next couple of weeks, and you best believe my little sidekick is coming with me. I don't know if you know this, but I'm quite a nervous flyer. I'm getting better as I'm doing it more, but this device makes some of those like stressful times a lot easier and more soothing for me, I'm realizing. I love like the weight of it and the satisfaction of turning it. A little ASMR moment here. You don't know how nice the weight is until you really feel it, but I'm gonna just try to show you like kind of the weight, like it's heavy, you know? And then when I get, a little anxious, I love being able to twist it, pull on it. The Fume is actually designed to be able to control the airflow of the device. So that little clicking is your airflow, but it's also really soothing to do. And then to change out your core, oh, I've got mint in here right now. I'm really loving the mint. You pull it out and then it's a magnet. So that also kind of becomes something that you can play with. I definitely think that giving your fingers something to do when you're trying to de-stress can be really beneficial, and that doesn't just include cutting down on a bad habit, but I'm also now finding myself gravitating to using it when I'm in situations that I'm also out of my comfort zone. The Fume Solano was just launched on November 6th, so you can now upgrade your journey pack to the Solano to enjoy the premium walnut barrel and onyx black coated mouthpiece that has a smoother finish. It is so sexy, so sharp looking. Fume has served over 150,000 customers and has thousands of success stories, and there is no reason that you can't be one too. You can join Fume in accelerating humanity's breakup from destructive habits by picking up your journey pack today. Head on over to tryfume.com/SherrilynDale or scan the QR code on the screen and use my code SherrilynDale for 10% off when you pick up your journey pack. That's tryfum.com/SherrilynDale for 10% off your order today. Thank you so much, Fume. I love ya. All right, today's case takes place in London in 2011, and I'm just going to kind of give you guys a little bit of a backstory just about the time that everybody was going through in these early days of August in 2011. So at the beginning of August 2011, there were riots in London. Mark Duggan, who was a 29-year-old Black British man, was shot to death by police in Tottenham, North London. This happened on August 4th, 2011. Now, the Metropolitan Police stated that officers were attempting to arrest Mark because there was suspicion that he was planning an attack and that he was in possession of a handgun. Mark ended up dying of his injury caused by the police, and then those circumstances led to protests in Tottenham between the 6th and the 11th of August. There were thousands of people that rioted all across different cities and towns in England, and there was a lot of looting, arson. Just looking at the video and photo footage, it's insane to see just like how many fires and just like what was going on in the city. Now, there were 5 deaths because of the riots that happened. This was after the fact. So obviously, I'm just trying to paint a picture here that this was a really, really intense time for London. In the midst of it all, police were called to an apartment in New Road, Harlington, which was near Heathrow Airport in London, and they were called on August 10th, 2011. Now, this flat had been shared by 2 hotel employees that worked at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel, which was near the airport. The 2 people that lived in the flat were 20-year-old Tibor Voss and 31-year-old Atilla. The police were called in the first place because Atilla and Tibor's co-workers had called police when the 2 of them had failed to show up for their 3 p.m. shift. Not only were they roommates, but they were also co-workers. Atilla was Tibor's manager at the hotel, and Tibor was a receptionist at the hotel. Police arrive at the flat, and inside they are met with an absolutely gruesome scene. 2 people were found brutally murdered. The victims were 20-year-old Tibor Voss, who obviously lived there, but the other victim was not his roommate / co-worker Atilla. It was 20-year-old Alice Adams. Police quickly learned that Alice was also a receptionist at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel, and she had only been working there for about 3 weeks. People who worked with Alice said that she was the type of coworker that just kind of walked into the position and fit in naturally, felt like she was there for much longer than the 3 weeks that she was there. She's described as very friendly, outgoing, had a bubbly personality, and she was also a really talented musician. I learned that she was quite impressive. Like, she was a wonderful pianist, but she had never even had proper training. She just taught herself how to play the piano, and she was one of those people who, if she heard a song, she was able to teach herself how to play it. Now, this is something that she and Tibor both had in common, so it was something that bonded the 2 particularly quite quickly. Tibor was an aspiring musician, he was a photographer, and people who worked with the 2 of them said that it was obvious that there was, you know, definitely an instant attraction and connection between the 2 of them. Now, Alice had a high school sweetheart. She was still with him while she was working at the hotel, but he had got accepted to school outside of the city. So they were kind of in that transition period of going through a little bit of those long distance relationship struggles. Tibor was also kind of going through things in his life. He actually wasn't from London, he was from Hungary, so he was feeling a little bit homesick, and I'm sure that having the 2 of them to just kind of lean on each other during those unpredictable, stressful times in their lives probably intensified that connection happening so quickly. They spent a lot of time after work together. They were also making plans to keep in touch in the long term because Tibor was actually getting to the point where he was moving back home to Hungary at the end of the summer, which was only a few weeks away. It sounds like he was really looking forward to getting back home. Tibor's somebody who was very close to his family. He grew up in a single parent household and had a sister. His father had passed away when the kids were quite young, so he grew up quite close with his mom and sister. That being said, when you're at home and in that situation, sometimes it kind of takes like distance to realize kind of where you want to be or what you're missing. And it sounds like that's kind of what Tibor was going through at this time. When he was still back home, he felt like he wanted to see more. He had this wanderlust in him, and he wanted to experience some things outside of Hungary and outside of the household. So that's what brought him to London. He wanted to see more parts of the world, and quickly when he arrived in London is when he got a job working at reception at the Radisson Edwardian Hotel. Through working at the hotel, he meets Atilla, who was his manager. Atilla is somebody who ended up working at the hotel after graduating business school and wanting to go into something with the intention of climbing the ranks and becoming very successful. He was also from Hungary, which they bonded over, but his upbringing sounded a lot different than Tibor's. Allegedly, he was abused at the hands of his stepfather and mother, which led to him moving to live with his grandparents. And then when he was 17, he realized that he was gay and was very fearful of the backlash that would come from friends that might have found out from school. He was somebody who was naturally just teased based on his personality. And then he was also really fearful of what was going to happen if his family found out. So he kept that to himself when he was in Hungary. After getting a degree in hotel management, he moves to London, where he gets a job at the Radisson Edwardian, and he started at reception. And then, like he had planned, he quickly climbed the ranks and became the manager of the front desk of the hotel. It sounds like he really kind of flourished and came into himself when he moved to London. He was able to feel like he could express himself and be his true self and be openly gay. And he was doing really well. People could see he was just very proud of his job, proud of the work that he had done, and he was really good at his job. It's not an easy job, especially being kind of in that busy hub of London near the airport. But he was a hit with not only staff, but also guests. In January 2011, he was named Employee of the Year, and that was actually based on the amount of positive reviews that hotel guests had left for him. He was somebody that the company had seen so much potential in that they actually gave him the flat that he was living in with Tibor that was behind the hotel. There were 2 bedrooms in this apartment, so when Atilla learns that Tibor is in a pretty rundown flat with several roommates that he's not really getting along with, that he says are stealing things from him and stuff like that. And then he also learns through Tibor that he's also just kind of having a difficult time from being away from home. Atilla reaches out and asks if he wants to be his roommate and take up that extra bedroom. He quickly takes Atilla up on the offer. He's excited to get out of the situation that he's in, and everything seems to be going really well. The flat becomes kind of like the hangout after work. Tibor even set up like a little DJ area where friends and co-workers would head over to after work, and he would DJ for them. Even though Atilla was 31 years old and Tibor was 20, nobody really seemed to notice that age difference. Everybody kind of just said like they clicked. They seemed to have a lot in common. Obviously, they were both from Hungary. They both wanted to pursue careers in hospitality. Also, speaking the same language is kind of, I'm sure, comforting when you're away from home and not hearing it as often. There was no doubt to people who knew both Atilla and Tibor that Atilla took Tibor under his wing and really wanted to help him out and see him succeed. While police were speaking to Alice, Atilla, and Tibor's co-workers, they actually learned that a few of them had been celebrating, partying hours earlier at Tibor and Attila's. Based on their accounts, though, there was absolutely no indication of anything that was going to go wrong in that flat, which is just eerie because you think of everything is going great, it's fine one moment, and then who knows if it was minutes later, hours after they left, 2 people are brutally murdered inside. And based on investigators' accounts, the scene was, the word that comes to mind is ghastly, not something that anybody would ever want to see, and you surely would never forget. Investigators see when they first opened the door that there was obvious celebration of sorts going on. There were drinks kind of like strewn about in the kitchen and the living room, and it was actually in the living room that they found Alice. She was laying on the living room floor. Her face was covered with a pillow, and she had been stabbed an alarming amount of times in the front and back of her body. From the living room, there was also blood that was leading to one of the bedrooms, and inside that bedroom is where Tibor was. He was in much different condition than Alice. He was found undressed on the bed. He had been stabbed twice. There was obvious 2 wounds to his chest, but there was like no blood on his body, and there was no blood in the room. Another thing about his body was that he appeared to be positioned quite strategically on the bed. He was laying on his back, his knees were bent, and it was kind of like an inviting position. You know what I mean? Police move throughout the flat, go into the next bedroom, but there is no sign of Atilla. Their first suspicion was he was possibly abducted and could have even been killed and taken somewhere else. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, the tensions were really, really high in London at this time. So that, coupled with the fact that everybody who's telling police about the three of these people, saying there is no way that Atilla could ever be responsible or capable for what happened to Tibor and Alice, led them to suspect that, okay, somebody else was involved, and here after the other co-workers left. When the investigation stretched from speaking to other people besides just like hotel staff that knew the three of them, they learned that Atilla had shared with some of his friends that things had started out really well with the roommate situation, but he was starting to feel a little resentful, he said. He felt like Atilla didn't really appreciate everything that he was doing for him, not just the mentorship that he was getting at work, but also living with him. And he was feeling just a little sloughed off. Now, keep in mind, Tibor is only 20 and Atilla is, 31. There's like an 11-year age gap there. And I do feel like usually as you get older, you start to kind of like reflect back and show appreciation for things that people have done for you. And further on in the video, we will learn a little bit more about like kind of, I think, where some of that deep-rooted resentment from Atilla was coming from. But it was part of those tensions that investigators learned even from talking with Tibor's friends as well, that he was feeling a little bit homesick and had made the decision to apply to school in Budapest, and he had actually been accepted. So that's why he was returning back at the end of the summer. It sounds like the whole premise of the party that had happened the night before was kind of like a little bit of a send-off for Tibor, a little bit of a goodbye party. But because of the riots that were going on, there weren't many coworkers that had showed up. I think a lot of people were fearful to kind of be anywhere late at night. So it was a few coworkers that came. Sounded like a pretty chill night. There was guitar playing, some singing going on. There were definitely having drinks, reminiscing about the times they had had together over the past year and a bit that he was there. The employees that had attended said that there was definitely alcohol consumed, and that at one point Atilla had taken some poppers. I've never indulged in poppers, but I guess it's a drug that is usually used for it's like euphoric and sexual enhancing effects. Now, the coworkers that had left Alice, Atilla, and Tibor said that they had left because they had to get to work the next day. So when more party favors were being passed around, they decided to dip out a little bit earlier because they were the ones that were going to be working the morning shift, and they were like, we have to be at work a lot earlier than you guys, so we'll see you when you come for your evening shift at 3 p.m. and do the turnaround. Obviously, when Tibor, Atilla, and Alice didn't show up for their shift, the coworkers that had just seen them only hours before were concerned and felt concerned enough to call the police. This investigation, it was rather quick, but it sounded really intense and taxing, especially because there's just like so many questions and so much when you're just looking at the scene that didn't make sense. In the living room where Alice was found, there were also male clothing in the living room that had blood on it, but it was just on the floor next to her body. And so investigators felt that belonged to Tibor, but he's not in the living room with his clothing on. His clothing was left. They got the impression that he was undressed and then dragged to the washroom where he was cleaned off and then placed on the bed where he was found. Then you have Alice, who is fully clothed, has far greater number of injuries than Tibor has, and she has a pillow on her face, and then Atilla is missing. So investigators wanted to know, all right, did somebody come to the flat after the other co-workers left? involved. They spoke to both Alice and Tibor's family, and they learned that Alice had actually phoned her mom and her boyfriend that evening after everybody had left the party. She didn't say too much to her mom. She had just said that she was going to be spending the night because she had had some drinks and she didn't want to drive home. And she had just mentioned to her mom that it was just her, Tibor, and Atilla at that time. So nobody else had come at this point that investigators know of. Then at around 3:30, Alice phoned her boyfriend, and she also told him that she was spending the night. It didn't sound like it was overly well received that she was going to be spending the night with two male co-workers. Well, she has a boyfriend and he's away from school, but she just insisted that it was just the three of them and she was going to be staying on the couch. Again, with the call to her boyfriend, no one else is mentioned. It's just her, Atilla, and Tibor. Now, the natural suspicion could be like, okay, obviously the boyfriend doesn't want to hear this. He's not happy about the fact that she's at Atilla and Tibor's, flew into a rage and, did something he regretted. But he was away at school. And even more puzzling is that there was no sign of forced entry into this flat, but there was also no sign of anybody leaving. Like I said, this was a gruesome crime scene. There was a lot of blood and there was no sign of any bloody footprints appearing in any of the exit points. There was no handprints on the door or on the window frame. It's like no one came or went, but there were only two people in the apartment. They were able to pull CCTV footage from the apartment and the surrounding areas. And again, they don't see anybody leaving with Atilla or Atilla leaving himself. For context, it was pretty much 2 full days that investigators, detectives, crime scene technicians are in this flat collecting evidence throughout the entire apartment, day in, day out, people coming in, coming out, taking pictures, collecting evidence, and there's no trace of Atilla or where he could have gone. It's like he simply vanished. Then investigators learned from a friend that Atilla, or somebody that was pretending to be Atilla, was alive because there was a new post on his Facebook. The post said, "I'd like to wake up from this nightmare." They tried to ping the location of where the post came from, but it just kind of showed that it was in the vicinity of the hotel and the flat. When you do those types of searches, it's not like exact coordinates. Like, okay, this is, number 14 in this building right here. It's just like a vicinity. So it kind of just adds more questions to this. It's like, okay, is this Atilla or is this the person that took Atilla? They find out really quickly because they are forging on with the investigation. And the next day when they come back to the scene, a member of the investigation team notices that a bedroom door that had been left open when they left was now closed. So they try to open the door, but they can't get in. It's not locked, but they can tell that something is blocking the entry. So police have to force their way in, and they realize that it was being blocked because the bed was pushed up on the door. And on the bed, Atilla Ban was laying there. He was naked, he was bloodied, and he had a knife sticking out of his arm and one sticking out of his buttock. But he was still alive. Police start asking him, like, are you okay? What's going on? I can't even imagine what that moment would have been like when you've been through that entire flat doing an intense investigation, and then all of a sudden you find somebody in this room that you had been in and out of numerous times and they weren't there before. Now all of a sudden they're there, they're bloodied, unclothed, and there's knives sticking out of them. But Atilla wasn't speaking to them. He was quite intoxicated and started kind of communicating kind of like in sign language, just kind of jumbling some words, almost like he was kind of in like this dazed catatonic state. It took some time, but eventually investigators were able to piece together what happened the night that Tibor and Alice were killed. Apparently when the party died down and it was only Tibor, Alice, and Atilla left, things got a little bit heated. The trio had ended up like laying in bed together, and then, one thing led to another, and they were just kind of I don't believe that there was any actual, like, taking it all the way going on. It sounds more of just like, like smooching and maybe exchanging like personal, like individual acts on Alice. There was both of the male's DNA on Alice's chest area. So that had gone on. And apparently at some point we know that Atilla had snapped. It's unsure of who was the first intended victim. We obviously know that Alice was stabbed over 20 times. Absolutely horrific. She was left on the floor with a pillow on her face, and that was most likely because Atilla couldn't look at her, look what he had done. This is quite common in personal attacks between people that know each other. After the fact, you don't want to look at what you've done, but it also is important to remember later on as we wrap this case up, kind of a sign of acknowledgement that you've done something and you don't want to look at what you've done. Now, Tibor was only stabbed twice in the chest, far less of a kind of rage attack than Alice. And then Atilla cut his clothes off of him and he brought Tibor's lifeless body with him into the bathtub. Now, Attila's claim is that he intended to take his life and he did not want to be alone, so that's why he brought Tibor with him, so that he could have somebody with him. This would explain why when investigators found Tibor's body on the bed, there was no scene of an attack in that room, no blood in that room, and looked like there was, no blood on him, that he was clean with just these wounds. Atilla said that his first attempt at unaliving himself did not work, and that's when he brought Tibor into the bedroom, positioned him on the bed. Again, we have to remember what that positioning was. It wasn't like he was tucked in, or just placed on the bed. He was strategically placed on the bed with his knees up, his hands kind of on the sides of his knees, kind of in an inviting position. After the fact, after he had positioned Tibor, Atilla said that he went back into the bathroom, into the bathtub, and tried to electrocute himself with a hairdryer, but that it didn't work and that the hairdryer was working while it was underwater. After these two attempts, instead of contacting police, letting them know what had happened, Atilla cuts a hole in the side of it's a divan bed base. This was the bed that Tibor was on, and he crawled in this slit in the bed. So those types of beds, they've got almost the kind of the fabric over top of the base, so it just kind of gives just a cleaner look. And he had cut it and then was inside, and so he was under the bed, but the bed is flush and you can't see into it, so no one looked in the bed. Essentially, he had brought supplies with him in there. He brought his cell phone, he had water. This is where he allegedly updated his Facebook status. And I think one of the reasons why investigators didn't notice it right away was because he had put the cut into the side of the bed, but then there was the bedding over top. So it kind of just, I guess, the one sheet would have laid across it. But not only that, he also cut little tiny holes so that he could see out and see what was going on. So for 2 days, while this investigation was going down, he is watching crime scene techs, investigators, police go through this scene, and he is in the bed. There was also signs that he went to the washroom and number 1 and 2 in this spot while he was hiding, to avoid coming out and being like, you guys are doing a great job. Can I please just use the washroom for a second? I'll just go right back in there. Just don't even, just act like I'm not here. So it was on that second night after everybody left, he once again attempted to take his own life and was once again unsuccessful. And then that's when I don't really know what the point was after the fact, because he had already done, I can't get too descriptive on YouTube because we are going to hear by the guidelines, but there were several like attempts that he had made using like different methods of doing that. And then when that didn't work, he just decided to, put a knife in his arm and in his buttocks, and then barricaded him on the bed in the room. After he was found, he was taken to hospital for treatment for the injuries that he had, and then he was arrested shortly after. His trial started on July 9th, 2012, and at his trial, prosecutors talked a lot more about Attila's internal obsession with Tibor. It came out that Attila was quite jealous of any relationship that Tibor had with others, especially like members of the opposite sex. Ladies were really interested in Tibor, even when they would have people come over after work and hang out and party while he was DJing. He liked the ladies and the ladies liked him, and this was something that Attila did not like to see. Once Alice started working at the hotel and their bond had gotten so close in such a short amount of time, it seems like this kind of intensified those feelings that Attila had for Tibor, and just like that rage within him that he wasn't going to be with him. Allegedly, Tibor was aware of Attila's feelings. I guess Attila had made it known, pursued him, and Tibor would just say, we're friends, we're roommates, we're coworkers, you're a mentor to me, I love and respect you, but I'm straight, I'm not into you. And so that, coupled with the fact that Tibor was going to be moving out of their apartment, he wasn't going to be living with him anymore and seeing him every day, and going back home pretty soon, then gets close with Alice, knowing that Alice has plans to keep in touch with Tibor. The whole thing was just like a recipe for disaster, and it just kept boiling within Attila, and he eventually completely lost it. Now, days before the murders, a few coworkers had actually started to see that breakdown of Attila. They were at a team building event, and I guess after it was done, there was a photo that was taken, and Tibor and Alice were in the photo, and Attila was not. He was out of the room. And when he came back into the room and finds out that there was a photo taken and that he wasn't in it, and they were, he blew up in front of everybody and was like, that's so disrespectful. You should have waited for me. If you're going to take a photo of you and the team, like, I should be in it. And people were just kind of like, whoa, like, it's just a photo, but recognize that he was really going through something. Basically, the only thing that Attila had really admitted in court was saying that after the party had died down and everybody had left, that the three of them had, snuggled up in bed, and according to him, they had taken turns performing sexual acts on Alice. And he admits to remembering these, this interaction between them, but he said that he had no recollection of unaliving them. He didn't deny that he had done it, though. He said that he didn't realize what he did until he woke up the next morning and saw the bodies. So his quote in court was, "I accept I killed them. I just can't remember what happened." And that was, that did not suffice in court. The jury didn't believe that he didn't remember, and on July 18th, 2012, he was found guilty of the murder of Alice Adams and Tibor Voss. He was sentenced to a minimum of 26 years in prison. I want to read a couple quotes that were taken from the court hearing, one of them from the judge, because I think it's so important, and it kind of hits home that, okay, you can say what you want, this is your excuse, you don't remember, but what those effects actually do for the surviving family members of these victims. So the judge said, "You say you cannot and still cannot remember. There is, of course, no one else to assist. That in itself creates an even greater burden for the two grieving families arising from the uncertainty of their loved ones' last moments." And I think that's so important because the narrative that we see a lot in these cases of like, oh, you can remember certain things, but then when it comes to owning up and actually just facing what you did, like the ultimate act of what you did that harmed the victim and then their families, it's just like such a cop-out. And the only person that it hurts is the victim's families. I can't imagine like what they would feel like to know that their son or daughter died the way that they did. And then for the person to essentially kind of say, well, I know that I did it, I just don't remember it, so I can't really give you that answer. That has to be gut-wrenching. And obviously there are details that are going to be hard for somebody to live with. But what I've learned from speaking with family members is that piece is so important to part of like you're never going to fully heal, but there is a healing journey of sorts. There's a closure journey, and not having those final moments answered, it's debilitating. You're left with speculating on your own and coming up with hundreds and thousands, I'm sure, millions of scenarios in your head where you could just easily absolve that pain to those families by just telling the truth. You've gotten this far. It's not going to change the outcome of what happened. You've essentially already admitted to it. So to just give that final form of peace, even though it doesn't seem like it would be peaceful to these families, you don't understand until you're in that situation. That's all they want to know. That's the last piece of wanting to know what happened. And then if you can give the why. I want to read Alice and Tibor's mother's statements in court, which both kind of touch on this and actually are firsthand account of those feelings. So Alice's mother in court said, "My heart is broken. My life will always be tinged with sadness. The most difficult thing to cope with is not knowing exactly what happened to my lovely Alice that night. Horrific as it would be to hear, the truth would be preferable to the constant struggle going on in my mind of trying to figure out the sequence of events leading up to Alice's murder." And yeah, I can only imagine you're sitting there wanting to know, and then when that person's not giving it to you, you're gonna drive yourself crazy trying to figure it out. That part breaks my heart so much, especially after a sentence has already been given, especially after you've already been essentially held accountable. That is the last piece. That is the least you can do for a family whose loved one you just ripped from them and thought you were entitled enough to do that. In court, Tibor's mom said, "It was impossible and devastating to believe something like this could happen. Previously, it was comforting for me to know that Tibor found a good friend in London who was mature, friendly, and intelligent. His friend promised me personally to look after my son and not let anything happen to him. I trusted him and regarded him as my own child." Those statements just rip my heart apart because I cannot even imagine, especially in that situation too, for Tibor, who's, he's out there, he's young, he's 20. Of course, his mom probably felt like, oh, you're in great hands. You're with your mentor. And also you're kind of at the finish line. He's coming back home. He was so close to his family and he was just weeks away from being reunited with them. And then that never happened. As of right now, for 2023, he has never admitted to what he did. He has never said who was first, what the interaction was right before the events occurred. Just personally, looking into the case on my own, I'm no expert or anything like that. I just felt like the fact that Alice had received far more injuries than Tibor showed, I guess, more hatred and rage. Also could have been more impulsive. I wouldn't be surprised if perhaps while there was interaction between the three of them, it kind of turned into just Alice and Tibor, maybe smooching together and not including Atilla, and then for him to see Tibor with somebody else was the final snap, since he was already struggling, seeing him happy and building a bond with somebody that wasn't him. In the same sense, you almost kind of think about it, though, that Tibor only had 2 injuries and then Alice had far more injuries. If Alice was being attacked first and there were that many blows to her, would Tibor have left, or was he first and then he couldn't, and then it was like just like all of the rage going after? See, like I cannot even imagine what families go through, because this is where I'm thinking. But again, at this point, we do not know. I don't know if we'll ever know. I really hope that we do, or that at least the family does. You know, they deserve it. I want to quote Alice's aunt, who gave a beautiful description of who her niece truly was. She says that she was a niece, a family member with the sweetest soul anybody had ever known. She is somebody who treated everyone she met with extreme kindness and love. And she was somebody who never judged anybody else or worried about what people thought about her. She didn't try to fit in just to be cool. She wore every color of the rainbow. She dyed her hair every single week. It's been everything from blue, pink, red, whatever color she was feeling that week. She also gave blood every single month, and she was the type of person who was a best friend to so many people. Everybody thought that they were Alice's best friend, and she definitely made them feel like that. She's also somebody that would cuddle a stranger, and her aunt beautifully put it that Alice was simply an angel that was put on this earth to touch the lives of everybody that she met. She also had a brilliant sense of humor. She was extremely talented, an amazing singer, songwriter, musician, and a wonderful artist. I have seen some of her art on Pinterest, and the family has shared throughout the years the art that Alice would make, and even from young age. This woman was talented. It was beautiful to go through and just see these creations that she made. Alice's family decided to honor Alice in what they felt was the most Alice way possible. They created the Alice Adams Foundation, and they actually raised money to build this fun, magical, serene area in a park in Black Park in Buckinghamshire in the UK. And because Alice loved building tree houses, this is something that she often did, and loved being outdoors, they built a tree house that people can go to and just immerse themselves in beauty and fun and adventure. So if you are in the area, or you ever find yourself there, absolutely go and stop by and honor Alice. I would love to see pictures. I'm going to also leave a link to the foundation in the description below. So if you want to go and check it out and learn more about the foundation, more about Alice, send some love and support to the family, that will be in my description. Attilla will be eligible for parole in 2038. He's going to be 60 years old at that time. And when I think about it, I think like, okay, I'm back in the day, I think like, oh, 60, you're so old. But now as I, get closer to my 40s, I'm like, 60 is not that old. But 60 is, there's still life to live. And in those ages that Tibor and Alice are never going to get to. They're never going to have it. I don't know. It's just like, you just want to like shake someone and be like, please just have compassion. You still get to potentially have some form of a life after everything that you've done. Like the very least that you can do is just give the family some peace. You're already sentenced. You've already acknowledged it. You've already said in court, like, I accept that I did this, but I just don't remember. As opposed to just being like, I accept I did this. This is what happened. Please forgive me. All right. That is it for me today, you guys. If you have not already, please don't forget to like and subscribe. It means the world to me. I love and I appreciate you so much. I also love and appreciate Fume. Thank you so much for continuing to support me, support this channel. Thank you to you guys for supporting Fume. It means so much to me. It helps me so much. And yeah, I will see you in the next video. I will miss you terribly. Until then, make sure to love each other, love yourself, and I will see you soon.